हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम टू द लाइव क्लास। तो आज हम पढ़ेंगे एनसीईआरटी हिस्ट्री क्लास 11 का थीम 3 जो कि है नोमैडिक एम्पायर्स। तो शुरू करते हैं। द टर्म nomadic empires can appear contradictory. Nomads are arguably quintessential wanderers organized in family assemblies with a relatively undifferentiated economic life and rudimentary systems of political organization. The term empire, on the other hand, carries with it the sense of a material location, a stability derived from complex social and economic structures, and the governance of an extensive territorial dominion through an elaborate administrative system, but the juxtapositions on which these definitions are framed may be too narrowly and ahistorically conceived. They certainly collapse when we study some imperial formations constructed by nomadic groups. The theme 4 we studied state formations in central Islamic lands whose origins lay in Bedouin nomadic traditions of the Arabian Peninsula. This chapter studies a different group of nomads, the Mongols of Central Asia, who established a transcontinental empire under the leadership of Genghis Khan, straddling Europe and Asia during the 13th and 14th centuries. Relative to the agrarian based imperial formations in China, the neighboring nomads of Mongolia may have inhabited a humbler, less complex social and economic world. But the Central Asian nomadic societies were not insulated islands that were impervious to historical change. These societies interacted, had an impact on, and learned from the larger world of which they were very much a part. This chapter studies the manner in which the Mongols under Genghis Khan adapted their traditional social and political customs to create a fearsome military machine and a sophisticated method of governance. The challenge of ruling a dominance spanning a millions of people, economics, and conventional systems meant that the Mongols could not simply impose their steppe traditions over their recently annexed territories. They innovated and compromised, creating a nomadic empire that had a huge impact on the history of Eurasia, even as it changed the character and composition of their own society forever. The steppe dwellers themselves usually produce no literature, so our knowledge of nomadic societies come mainly from chronicles, travelogues, and documents produced by city based literature. These authors often produce extremely ignorant and biased reports of nomadic life. The imperial success of the Mongols, however, attracted many literati. Some of them produced travelogues of their experiences, others stayed to serve Mongol masters. These individuals came from a variety of backgrounds: Buddhist, Confucian, Christian, Turkish, and Muslim. Although not always familiar with Mongol customs, many of them produce sympathetic accounts, even eulogies that challenged and complicated the otherwise hostile city-based terror against the steppe marauders. The history of the Mongols therefore provides interesting details to question the manner in which sedentary societies usually characterized nomads or as primitive barbarians. The term barbarian is derived from the Greek barbaros, which meant a non Greek someone whose language sounded like a random noise. Barbar. In Greek texts, barbarians were depicted like children unable to speak or reason properly, cowardly, effeminate, luxurious, cruel, slothful, greedy, and politically unable to govern themselves. The stereotype passed to the Romans, who used the term for the Germanic tribes, the Gauls, and the Huns. The Chinese had different terms for the steppe barbarians, but none of them carried a positive meaning. Perhaps the most valuable research on the Mongols was done by Russian scholars starting in the 18th and 19th centuries as the Tsarist regime consolidated its control over Central Asia. This work was produced within a colonial milieu and was largely survey notes produced by travelers, soldiers, merchants, and antiquarian scholars. In the early 20th century, after the extension of Soviet republics in the region, a new Marxist historiography argued that the prevalent mode of production determined the nature of social relation. It placed Genghis Khan and the emerging Mongol Empire within a scale of human evolution that was witnessing a transition from a tribal to a feudal mode of production, from a relatively classless society to one where there were wide differences between the lord, the owners of land, and the peasant. Despite following such a deterministic interpretation of history, excellent research on Mongol languages, their society and culture was carried out by scholars such as Boris Yakovlevich Blandirstov. Others such as Vasily Vladimirovich were told did not quit to the official line at a time when the Stalinist regime was extremely wary of regional nationalism. Bartol's sympathetic and positive assessment of the career and achievements of the Mongols under Genghis Khan and his successors got him into trouble with the censors. It severely curtailed the circulation of the works of the scholar, and it was only in the 1960s, during and after the more liberal Khrushchev era, that his writings were published in 9 volumes. The transcontinental span of the Mongol Empire also meant that the sources available to scholars are written in a vast number of languages. Perhaps the most crucial are the sources in Chinese, Mongolian, Persian, and Arabic, but vital materials are also available in Italian, Latin, French, and Russian. Often the same text was produced in two languages with differing contents. For example, the Mongolian and Chinese versions of the earliest narrative of Genghis Khan titled Mongol Un New Toben, The Secret History of the Mongols are quite different, and the Italian and Latin versions of Marco Polo's travel to the Mongol court do not match. Since the Mongols produced little literature on their own and were instead written about by the literati from foreign cultural milieux, historians have to often double as philologists to pick at the meanings of phrases for their closest approximation to Mongol uses. The works of scholars like Igor de Rechwich on the secret history of the Mongols and Gerhard Dorfer on Mongol and Turkic terminologies that infiltrated into the Persian languages brings out the difficulties involved in studying the history of the Central Asian nomads. As we will notice through the remainder of this chapter, despite their incredible achievement, there is much about Genghis Khan and the Mongol world empire still awaiting the diligent scholar's scrutiny. Introduction. In the early decades of the 13th century, the great empire of the Euro-Asian continent realized the dangers posed to them by the arrival of the new political power in the steppes of Central Asia. Genghis Khan had united the Mongol people. Genghis Khan's political vision, however, went far beyond the creation of a confederacy of Mongol tribes in the steppes of Central Asia. He had a mandate from God to rule the world. Even though his own lifetime was spent consolidating his hold over the Mongol tribes, leading and directing campaigns into adjoining areas in North China, Transoxiana, Afghanistan, eastern Iraq, and the Russian steppes. His descendants traveled further afield to fulfill Genghis Khan's vision and create the largest empire the world had ever seen. It was in the spirit of Genghis Khan's ideals that his grandson Monkey warned the French ruler Louis IX, "In heaven there is only one eternal sky, on earth there is only one Lord, Genghis Khan, the son of heaven. When by the power of the eternal heaven the whole world from the rising of the sun to its setting shall be at one in joy and peace, then it will be made clear that what we are going to do." If, when you have understood the decor of the eternal heaven, you are unwilling to pay attention and believe it, saying, our country is far away, our mountains are mighty, our sea is vast. And in this confidence, you bring an army against us. We know what we can do. He who made easy what was difficult and near that what was far off, the eternal heaven knows. These were not empty threats, and the 1236 to 41 campaigns of Batu, another grandson of Genghis Khan, devastated Russian lands up to Moscow, seized Poland and Hungary, and camped outside Vienna. In the 13th century, it did seem that the eternal sky was one on the side of the Mongols, and many parts of China, the Middle East, and Europe saw in Genghis Khan's conquest of the inhabited world the wrath of God, the beginning of the day at a day of judgment. The capture of Bukhara. Juveni, a late 13th century Persian chronicle of the Mongol rulers of Iran, carried an account of the capture of Bukhara in 1220. After the conquest of the city, Juveni reported Genghis Khan went to the festival ground where the rich residents of the city were and addressed them. O people, know that you have committed great sins and that the great ones among you have committed these sins. If you ask me what proof I have for these words, I say, it is because I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you. Now, one man had escaped from Bukhara after his capture and had come to Khorasan. He was questioned about the faith of the city and replied, they came, they mined the walls, they burnt, they slew, they plundered, and they departed. How did the Mongols create an empire that dwarfed the achievements of the other world conqueror Alexander in the pre-industrial age of poor technological communication? What skills were deployed by the Mongols to administer and control such a vast dominion? For someone so self confidently aware of his moral, divinely dispensed right to rule, how did Genghis Khan relate to the diverse social and religious groups that comprised his dominion? In the making of his imperium, what happened to this plurality? We need to start our discussion, however, with a humbler set of questions to better comprehend the social and political background of the Mongols and Genghis Khan. Who were the Mongols? Where did they live? Who did they interact with? And how do we know about their society and politics? Social and political background. The Mongols were a diverse body of people linked by similarities of language to the Tatars, Khitan, and Manchus to the east and the Turkic tribes to the west. Some of the Mongols were pastoralists while others were hunter gatherers. The pastoralists tended horses while others horses, sheep, and to a lesser extent cattle, goats, and camels. They nomadized in the steppes of Central Asia in a tract of land in the area of the modern state of Mongolia. This was and still is a majestic landscape with wide horizons, rolling plains ringed by the snow-capped Altai Mountains to the west, the arid Gobi Desert in the south, and drained by the Onon and Selga rivers and myriad springs from the melting snows of the hills in the north and the west. Lush, luxuriant grasses for pasture and considerable small game were available in a good season. The hunter-gatherers resided to the north of the pastoral pastoralist in the Siberian forest. They were a humbler body of people than the pastoralists, making a living from trade in furs of animals trapped in the summer months. There were extremes of temperature in the entire region. harsh long winters followed by brief dry summers. Agriculture was possible in the pastoral region during short parts of the year. But the Mongols, unlike some of the Turks further west, did not take to farming. Neither the pastoral nor the hunting gathering economics could sustain dense population settlements, and as a result, the region possessed no cities. The Mongols lived in tents, gears, and traveled with their herds from their winter to summer pasture lands. Ethnic and language ties united the Mongol people, but the scarce resources meant that their society was divided into patrilineal lineages. The richer families were larger, possessed more animals and pestilence. They therefore had many followers and were more influential in local politics. Periodic natural calamities, either unusually harsh cold winters when game and stored provisions ran out of drought, which passed the grasslands, would force families to force further afield, leading to conflict over pasture lands and predatory raids in search of livestock. Groups of families would occasionally ally for offensive and defensive purposes around richer and more powerful lineages, but barring the few exceptions, these confederacies were usually small and short lived. The size of Genghis Khan's confederation of Mongol and Turkish tribes was perhaps matched in size only by that which had been stitched together in the 5th century by Attila. Unlike Attila, however, Genghis Khan's political system was far more durable and survived its founder. It was stable enough to counter large armies with superior equipment in China, Iran, and Eastern Europe. And as they established control over these regions, the Mongols administered complex agrarian economies and urban settlements, sedentary societies that were quite distant from their own social experience and habitat. Although the social and political organization of the nomadic and agrarian economies were very different, the two societies were hardly foreign to each other. In fact, the scant resources of the steppe lands drove Mongols and other Central Asian nomads to trade and barter with their sedentary neighbors in China. This was mutually beneficial to both parties. Agricultural produce and iron utensils from China were exchanged for horses, furs, and game trapped in steppe. Commerce was not without its tensions, especially as the two groups unhesitatingly applied military pressure to enhance profit. When the Mongol lineages allied, they could force their Chinese neighbors to offer better terms and trade ties were sometimes discarded in favor of outright plunder. This relationship would alter when the Mongols were in disarray. The Chinese would then confidently assert their influence in the steppe. These frontier wars were more debilitating to settled societies. They dislocated agriculture and plundered cities. Nomads, on the other hand, could retreat away from the zone of conflict with marginal losses. Throughout its history, China suffered extensively from nomad intrusion and different regions. Even as early as the 8th century BCE, built fortifications to protect their subjects. Starting from the 3rd century BCE, these fortifications started to be integrated into a common defensive outwork, known today as the Great Wall of China, a dramatic visual testament to the disturbance and fear perpetrated by nomadic raids on the agrarian societies of North China. The career of Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan was born sometime around 1162 near the Onon River in the north of the present-day Mongolia. Named Temujin, he was the son of Esuji, the chieftain of the Kyath, a group of families related to the Vorjigit clan. His father was murdered at an early age and his mother, Olen Eke raised Temujin, his brothers and stepbrothers in great hardship. The following decade was full of reversal. Temujin was captured and enslaved, and soon after his marriage, his wife Pote was kidnapped and he had to fight to recover her. During these years of hardship, he also managed to make important friends. The young Woguruchu was his first ally and remained a trusted friend. Jamuka, his blood brother Anda, was another. Temujin also restored old alliances with the rulers of Kariots, Togril or Ong Khan, his father's old blood brother. Through the 1180s and 1190s, Temujin remained an ally of Ong Khan and used the alliance to defeat powerful adversaries like Jemuka, his old friend who had become a hostile foe. It was after defeating him that Temujin felt confident enough to move against other tribes, the powerful Tatars, his father's assassins, the Karyas, and Ong Khan himself in 1203. The final defeat of the Neman people and the powerful Jamuka in 1206 left Temujin as the dominant personality in the politics of the steppe lands, a position that was recognized at an assembly of Mongol chieftains, Kurultai, where he was proclaimed the great Khan of the Mongols, Khan with the title Genghis Khan, the Oceanic Khan or universal ruler. Just before the Kultai of 1206, Genghis Khan had reorganized the Mongol people into a more effective, disciplined military force, see following sections, that facilitated the success of his future campaigns. The first of his concern was to conquer China, divided at this time into three realms. The Xia people of Tibetan origin in the northwestern provinces, the Jurchen whose Qin dynasty ruled North China from Peking, the Sung dynasty who controlled the South China. By 1209, the Sisai were defeated. The Great Wall of China was breached in 1213 and Peking sacked in 1215. Long drawn out battles against the Qin continued until 1234. But Genghis Khan was satisfied enough with the progress of his campaigns to return to his Mongolian homeland in 1216 and leave the military affairs of the region to his subordinates. After the defeat in 1218 of the Karakita, who controlled the Tinshan Mountains northwest of China, Mongol dominance reached the Amu Darya and the states of Transylvania and Khwarezm. Sultan Muhammad, the ruler of Khwarezm, felt the fury of Genghis Khan's rage when he executed Mongol envoys in the campaigns between 1219 and 2021. The great cities Otrar, Bukhara, Samarkand, Balkh, Kurganj, Merv, Nisapur, and Herat surrendered to the Mongol forces. Towns that resisted were devastated. At Nisapur, where a Mongol prince was killed during the siege operation, Genghis Khan commanded that the town should be laid waste in such a manner that the site could be plucked upon, and that in the exertion of vengeance for the death of the prince, not even cats and dogs should be left alive. Estimated extent of Mongol destruction. All reports of Genghis Khan's campaigns agree at the vast number of people killed following the capture of cities that defied his authority. The numbers are staggering. At the capture of Nisapur in 1220, 1,747,000 people were massacred, while the toll at Herat in 1222 was 1,600,000 people, and at Baghdad in 1258, 800,000. Smaller towns suffered proportionately. Nasa 70,000 dead, Behak district 17,000, and Atton in the Kohistan province 12,000 individuals were executed. How did medieval chroniclers arrive at such figures? Juveni, the Persian chronicler at, of the Ikhans, stated that 1,300,000 people were killed in Mer. He reached the figure because it took 13 days to count the dead, and each day they counted 100,000 corpses. Mongol forces, in pursuit of Sultan Muhammad, pushed into Azerbaijan, defeated Russian forces at the Crimea, and encircled the Caspian Sea. Another wing followed the Sultan's son Jalaluddin into Afghanistan and the Sindh province. At the banks of the Indus, Genghis Khan considered returning to Mongolia through North India and Assam, but the heat, the natural habitat, and the ill portents reported by his summoned soothsayer made him change his mind. Genghis Khan died in 1227, having spent most of his life in military combat. His military achievements were astounding, and they were largely a result of his ability to innovate and transform different aspects of steppe combat into extremely effective military strategies. The horse riding skills of the Mongols and the Turks provided speed and mobility to the army. Their abilities as rapid shooting archers from horseback were further perfected during the regular hunting expeditions, which doubled as field maneuvers. The steppe cavalry had always traveled light and moved quickly, but now it brought all its knowledge of the terrain and the weather to do the unimaginable. They carried out campaigns in the depths of winter, treating frozen rivers as highways to enemy cities and camps. Nomads were convincingly at loss against fortified encampments, but Genghis Khan learned the importance of siege engines and naphtha bombardment very quickly. His engineers prepared light portable equipment which was used against opponents with devastating effects. The Mongols after Genghis Khan. We can divide Mongol expansion after Genghis Khan's death into two distinct phases. The first, which spanned the years 1236 to 42, when the major gains were in the Russian steppes, Bulgar, Kiev, Poland, and Hungary. The second phase, including the years 1255 to 1300, led to the conquest of all of China, 1279, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. The frontier of the empire stabilized after this campaign. The Mongol military forces met with few reversals in the decades after 1213, 1203, but quite noticeably after the 1260s, the original impetus of campaigns could not be sustained in the West. Although Vienna and beyond it Western Europe as well as Egypt was within the grasp of Mongol forces, their retreat from the Hungarian steppes and defeat at the hands of the Egyptian forces signaled the emergence of new political trends. There were two phases to this. The first was the consequence of the internal politics of succession within the Mongol family, where the descendants of Jochi and Ogodei allied to control the office of the Great Khan in the first two generations. These interests were more important than the pursuit of campaigns in Europe. The second compulsion occurred as the Jochi and Ogodei lineages were marginalized by Tolui branch of Genghis Khan descendants. With the accession of Monki, a descendant of Tolui, Genghis Khan's youngest son, military campaigns were pursued energetically in Iran during the 1250s, but as Tolui interest in the conquest of China increased during the 1260s, forces and supplies were increasingly diverted into the heartlands of the Mongol dominion. As a result, the Mongols fielded a small, understaffed force against the Egyptian military. The defeat and the increasing preoccupation with China of the Toluyid family marked the end of western expansion of the Mongols. Concurrently, conflict between the Jochid and Toluyid descendants along the Russian-Iranian frontier diverted the Jochids away from further Europe campaigns. The suspension of Mongol expansion in the west did not arrest the campaigns in China, which was reunited under the Mongols. Paradoxically, it was at the moment of its greatest success that internal turbulence between members of the ruling family manifested itself. The next section discusses the factors that led to some of the greatest successes of the Mongol political enterprise, but also inhibited its progress. Social, political, and military organization. Among the Mongols and many other nomadic societies as well, all the able bodied adult males of the tribe bore arms. They constituted the armed forces when the occasion demanded. The unification of the different Mongol tribes and subsequent campaigns against diverse people introduced new members into Genghis Khan's army, complicating the composition of this relatively small, undifferentiated body into an incredibly heterogeneous mass of people. It included groups like Turkic Uyghurs who had accepted his authority willingly. It also included defeated people like the carriers who were accommodated in the Confederacy despite their earlier hostility. Genghis Khan worked to systematically erase the old tribal identities of the different groups who joined his confederacy. His army was organized according to the old strict system of decimal units, in divisions of tens, hundreds, thousands, and notionally 10,000 soldiers. In the old system, the clan and the tribe would have coexisted within the decimal units. Genghis Khan stopped this practice. He divided the old tribal groupings and distributed their members into new military units. Any individual who tried to move from his or her allotted group without permission received harsh punishment. The largest unit of soldiers, approximating 10,000 soldiers to one, now included fragmented groups of people from a variety of different tribes and clans. This altered the old steppe social order, integrating different lineages and clans and providing them with a new identity derived from his progenitor Genghis Khan. The new military contingents were required to serve under his four sons and specially chosen captains of his army units called Noyan. Also important within the new deal were a band of followers who had served Genghis Khan loyally through grave adversities for many years. Genghis Khan publicly honored some of these individuals as his blood brothers, and yet others, free men of a humbler rank, were given special ranking as his bondsman Nokar, a title that marked their close relationship with their master. This ranking did not preserve the rights of the old clan chieftains. The new aristocracy derived its status from a close relationship with the great Khan of the Mongols. In this new hierarchy, Genghis Khan assigned the responsibility of governing the newly conquered people to his four sons. This comprised the four ulus, a term that did not originally mean fixed territories. Genghis Khan's lifetime was still the age of rapid conquest and expanding dominance, where frontiers were still extremely fluid. For example, the eldest son Jochi received the Russian states, but the farthest section of his territory, Ulus, was indeterminate. It extended as far west as his horse could roam. The second son, Chagatai, was given the Transrussian steppe and lands north of the Pamin Mountains, adjacent to those of his brother. Presumably, these lands would shift as Jochi marched westward. Genghis Khan had indicated that his third son, Ogodei, would succeed him as the great Khan, and on accession, the prince established his capital at Karakorum. The youngest son, Toli, received the ancestral lands of Mongolia. Genghis Khan envisaged that his sons would rule the empire collectively, and to underline this point, military contingents Tama of the individual princes were placed in each ulus. The sense of a dominion shared by the members of the family was underlined at the assembly of chieftains. Pural ties, where all decisions relating to the family or the state for the forthcoming season, campaigns, distribution of plunder, pasture lands, and succession were collectively taken. Genghis Khan has already fashioned a rapid courier system that connected the distant areas of his regime. Fresh mounts and dispatch riders were placed in outposts at regular spaced distances. For the maintenance of this communication system, the Mongol nomads contributed a tenth of their herd, either horses or livestock, as provisions. This was called the Kukar tax, a leave that the nomads paid willingly for the multiple benefits that it brought. The courier system Yam was further refined after Genghis Khan's death, and its speed and reliability surprised travelers. It enabled the great Khans to keep a check on developments at the farthest end of their regime across the continental landmass. The conquered people, however, hardly felt a sense of affinity with the new nomadic masters. During the campaigns in the first half of the 13th century, cities were destroyed, agricultural lands laid waste, trade and handicraft production disrupted. Tens of thousands of people, the exact figure are lost in the exaggerated reports of the time, were killed, if and more enslaved. All classes of people, from the elites to the peasantry, suffered. In the resulting instability, the underground canals called canals in the arid Iranian plateau could no longer receive periodic maintenance. As they fell into disrepair, the desert crept in. This led to an ecological devastation from which parts of Khorasan never recovered. Once the dust from the campaigns had settled, Europe and China were territorially linked. In the peace ushered in by Mongol conquest, Pax Mongolica, trade connections matured, commerce and travel along the Silk Route reached its peak under the Mongols, but unlike before, the trade routes did not terminate in China. They continued north into Mongolia and to Karakoram, the heart of the new empire. Communication and ease of travel was vital to retain the coherence of Mongol regime, and travelers were given a pass, Peza in Persian, Gurgi in Mongolian, for safe conduct. Traders paid the Baj tax for the same purpose, all acknowledging thereby the authority of the Mongol Khan. The contradictions between the nomadic and sedentary elements within the Mongol Empire eased through the 13th century. In the 1230s, for example, as the Mongols waged their successful war against the Qin dynasty in North China, there was a strong pressure group within the Mongol leadership that advocated the massacre of all peasantry and the conversion of their fields into pasture land. But by the 1270s, when South China was annexed to the Mongol Empire after the defeat of the Sung dynasty, Genghis Khan's grandson Kublai Khan appeared as the protector of the peasants and the cities. In the 1290s, the Mongol ruler of Iran, Ghazan Khan, a descendant of Genghis Khan's youngest son Toli, Tulu, warned family members and other generals to avoid pillaging the peasantry. It did not lead to a stable, prosperous reign. He advised in a speech whose sedentary overturns would have made Genghis Khan shudder. Ghazan Khan's speech. Ghazan Khan was the first 11th Khanate ruler to convert to Islam. He gave the following speech to the Mongol Turkish nomad commanders, a speech that was probably drafted by his Persian Wazir Rasiduddin, Rasiduddin and included in the minister's letters. I am not on the side of the Persian peasantry. If there is a purpose in pleasing them all, there is no one with more power to do this than I. Let us rope them together. But if you wish to be certain of collecting grain and food for your tables in the future, I must be harsh with you. You must be taught reason. If you insult the peasantry, take their oxen and seed and trample their crops into the ground, what will you do in the future? The obedient peasantry must be distinguished from the peasantry who are rebels. From Genghis Khan's reign itself, the Mongols had recruited civil administrators from the conquest societies. They were sometimes moved around Chinese secretaries deployed in Iran and Persians in China. They helped in integrating the distant dominants, and their backgrounds and training were always useful in blunting the harsher edges of nomadic predation on sedentary life. The Mongol Khans trusted them as long as they continued to raise revenue for their masters, and these administrators could sometimes command considerable influence. In the 1230s, the Chinese minister Ye Lu Chusa muted some of Ogedei's more rapacious instincts. The Juveni family played a similar role in Iran through the latter half of the 13th century, and at the end of the century, the Wazir Rasiduddin drafted the speech that Ghazan Khan delivered to his Mongol competitors, asking them to protect, not harass the peasantry. The pressure to sedentarize was greater in the new areas of Mongol domicile areas, distant from the original steppe habitat of the nomads. By the middle of the 13th century, the sense of a common patrimony shared by all the brothers was gradually replaced by individual dynasty, each ruling their separate ulus, a term which carried the sense of a territorial dominance. This was in part a result of succession struggles where Genghis Khan descendants competed for the office of Great Khan and prized pastoral lands. Descendants of Tuli had come to rule both China and Iran, where they had formed the Yuan and Khan dynasties. Descendants of Jochi formed the Golden Horde and ruled the Russian steppes. Chagatai successor ruled the steppes of Transonia and the lands called Turkestan today. Noticeably, nomadic traditions persisted longest among the steppe dwellers in Central Asia. Descendants of Chagatai and Russia, the Golden Horde. The gradual separation of the descendants of Genghis Khan into separate lineage groups implied that their connection with the memory and traditions of a past family corneredness also altered. At an obvious level, this was the result of competition amongst the cousin clans, and here the two lead branch was more adept in presenting their version of the family disagreements in the histories produced under their patronage. To a large extent, this was a consequence of their control of China and Iran and the large number of literati that its family members could recruit. At a more sophisticated level, the disengagement with the past also meant underlining the merits of the regnant rulers as a contrast to other past monarchs. This exercise in comparison did not exclude Genghis Khan himself. Persian chronicles produced in Tukhan, Iran, during the late 13th century detailed the gory killings of the Great Khan and greatly exaggerated the numbers killed. For example, in contrast to an eyewitness report that 400 soldiers defeated the citadel of Bukhara, an in Khan Chronicle reported that 30,000 soldiers were killed in the attack on the citadel. Although two Khan reports still elongized Genghis Khan, they also carried a statement of relief that times had changed and the great killings of the past were over. The Genghis Khan legacy was important, but for his descendants to appear as convincing heroes to a sedentary audience, they could no longer appear in quite the same way as their ancestors. Following the research of David Allen, recent work on the Wasa, the code of law that Genghis Khan was supposed to have promulgated at the Kultai in 1206, had elaborated on the complex way in which the memory of the great Khan was fashioned by his successor. In its earliest formulation, the term was written as Yasak, which meant law, taker, or order. Indeed, the few regulations, the organization, or indeed the few details that we possess about the Yasak concern administrative regulation, the organization of the hunt, the army, and the postal system. By the middle of the 13th century, however, the Mongols had started using the related term Yasa in a more general sense to mean the legal code of Genghis Khan. We may be able to understand the changes in the meaning of the term if we take a look at some of the other developments that occurred at the same time. By the middle of the 13th century, the Mongols had emerged as a unified people and just created the largest empire the world had ever seen. They ruled over very sophisticated urban societies with their respective histories, cultures, and laws. Although the Mongols dominated the region politically, they were a numerical minority. The one way in which they could protect their identity and distinctiveness was through a claim to a sacred law given to them by their ancestors. The Yasa was in all probability a compilation of the customary tradition of the Mongol tribes. But in referring to as Genghis Khan's code of law, the Mongol people also laid claim to a lawgiver like Moses and Solomon, whose authoritative code could be imposed on their subjects. The Yasa served to cohere the Mongol people around a body of shared beliefs. It acknowledged their affinity to Genghis Khan and his descendants, and even as they observed different aspects of his sedentary lifestyle, gave them the confidence to retain their ethnic identity and impose the laws upon the defeated savages. It was an extremely empowering ideology, and although Genghis Khan may not have planned such a legal code, it was certainly inspired by his vision and was vital in the construction of a Mongol universal dominion. Yes, sir. In 1221, after the conquest of Bukhara, Genghis Khan had assembled the rich Muslim residents at the festival ground and had admonished them. He called them sinners and warned them to compensate for their sins by parting with their hidden wealth. The episode was dramatic enough to be painted, and for a long time afterwards, people still remember the incident. In the late 16th century, Abdullah Khan, a distant descendant of Jochi, Genghis Khan's elder son, went to the same festival ground in Bukhara. Unlike Genghis Khan, however, Abdullah Khan went to perform his holy day prayers there. His chronicler Hafiz-e-Tanis reported this performance of Muslim piety by his master and included the surprising comment. This was according to the Yasa of Genghis Khan. Conclusion: situating Genghis Khan and the Mongols in the world history. When we remember Genghis Khan today, the only image that appear in our imagination are those of conqueror, the destroyer of cities, and an individual who was responsible for the death of thousands of people. Many 13th century residents of towns in China, Iran, and Eastern Europe looked at the Hordes from the steppes with fear and disdain. And yet, for the Mongols, Genghis Khan was the greatest leader of all time. He united the Mongol people, freed them from interminable tribal wars and Chinese exploitation, brought them prosperity, fashioned a grand transcontinental empire, and restored trade routes and markets that attracted distant travelers like the Venetian Marco Polo. The contrasting images are not simply a case of dissimilar perspectives. This would make us pause and reflect on how one dominant perspective can completely erase all other. Beyond the opinions of the defeated sedentary people, consider for a moment the sheer size of the Mongol dominion in the 13th century and the diverse body of people and faiths that it embraced. Although the Mongol Khans themselves belonged to a variety of different faiths, some Buddhist, Christian, and eventually Islam. They never let their personal beliefs dictate public policy. The Mongol rulers recruited administrators and armed contingents from people of all ethnic groups and religions. Theirs was a multi ethnic, multilingual, multi religious regime that did not feel threatened by its pluralistic constitution. This was utterly unusual for the time, and historians are only now studying the ways in which the Mongols provided ideological models for later regimes like the Mughals of India to follow. The nature of the documentation on the Mongols and any nomadic regime makes it virtually impossible to understand the inspiration that led to the confederation of fragmented groups of people in the pursuit of an ambition to create an empire. The Mongol Empire eventually altered in its different milieus, but the inspiration of its founder remained a powerful force. At the end of the 14th century, Timur, another monarch who aspired to universal dominion, hesitated to declare himself monarch because he was not of Genghis Khan descendant. When he did declare his independent sovereignty, it was as the son-in-law guardian of the Genghis Khan family. Today, after decades of Soviet control, the country of Mongolia is recreating its identity as an independent nation. It has seized upon Genghis Khan as a great national hero who is publicly venerated and whose achievements are recounted with pride. At a crucial juncture in the history of Mongolia, Genghis Khan has once again appeared as an iconic figure for the Mongol people, mobilizing memories of great past in the forging of national identity that can carry the nation into the future. तो ये है इस चैप्टर का एक्सरसाइज, और इसी के साथ हमारा आज का चैप्टर ख़त्म होता है। डेली लाइफ क्लास के लिए चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कर दीजिए और नोटिफिकेशन आइकन को क्लिक कर दीजिए, और वीडियो अच्छी लगी तो लाइक कर दीजिए। आज का सेशन यहीं तक था। थैंक यू, थैंक्स फॉर ज्वाइनिंग।